Joining us tonight, now joining us live with congressional reaction to tonight's U.S. strikes is our very own Chad Program. Chad, I'm sure you're hearing from all of your congressional sources tonight. I'm dying to hear what they have to say.
Well, Sean, you know, there have been two members from the Democratic side of the aisle who've called for impeachment. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrat from New York, has just put out a statement saying this may ensnare us in war for, quote, generations, and clearly there are grounds for impeachment. Sean Casten is a Democrat from Illinois, and he says this is an unambiguous impeachable offense. We've also heard, you know, this is not a partisan issue necessarily. There are some Republicans who have some reservations about this. Thomas Massey, the Republican from Kentucky, who has a resolution that he hopes to bring to the floor in the coming days with Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California, to prohibit
in fairness, Chad, in fairness, I think it does need to be pointed out, Tom Massey never agrees with the Republican Party. Let's be honest here. He is a lone wolf, and he has pretty much isolated himself from the rest of the coalition. I don't think he represents it. I think whatever AOC says would be to be expected. We have also heard from John Fetterman. He was very happy with the president's actions today. Right. So there, at least somebody on the Democratic side understands the need that you cannot allow nuclear weapons in the hands of people that have shown no respect for human life at all whatsoever.
And Sean, I was struck yesterday by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Democrat from Florida, pro-Israel, and she said, you know, we need to keep, and this was pretty much the quote, our foot on the neck of Iran. You know, she was, you know, had some reservations here, but she is a pro-Israel Democrat, and much like Fetterman, maybe thought that this was the right thing to do. But there are some other Republicans who've expressed some reservations here, and then I'm going to go to what Tim Kaine said here in a minute. Warren Davidson, Republican of Ohio, he says it's hard to convince me that this is something that is legal under the Constitution. Now, Tim Kaine, the Democrat from Virginia, he already had teed up a resolution to be considered in the Senate this week to say we have to vote under our war powers, under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, to decide whether or not to go into Iran. That was set up probably to have some vote later this coming week here. And he accused the president of, quote, horrible judgment. He said this is going to push us into a third idiotic, his words, idiotic war. Now, most Republicans have been willing to give deference to the president here. The congressional leadership was briefed, according to a senior White House official. We heard very early on from John Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, and House Speaker Mike Johnson, and they clearly thought that this was the right thing to do. And generally what we've gotten from Republicans, despite what I said about Davidson and Massey, is that they've thought that the president has the authority to do this. Even Adam Smith, who is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, said yesterday, he said, you know, we're going to, quote, flail around in Congress. We will call for hearings. We will call for investigations. We will call for answers. He said, but the President of the United States is going to do what he's going to do under the War Powers Clause in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. He says, you know, Congress is always kind of cut out of this. That might not be precisely what the founders intended, but so far, you know, most Republicans are willing to stand by the president. I would be very interested to see what the reaction is after a briefing that comes up in the Senate on Tuesday. This was already on the books, a classified briefing for all senators about, you know, what the information was. Now this story has changed dramatically here. But if they start to see this go the other direction, or there start to be, you know, collateral damage, or maybe there's retaliation somewhere, does that harden and stiffen the resolve of some members? Or do they say, look, you know, we need to hit back, and we need to hit back hard? You know, I was, reminded what happened to the Marines in Beirut in the early 1980s. You know, and that was an Iranian, you know, proxy, killed 241 service members at the barracks in Beirut. And this is where there's a lot of concern about maybe retaliation by Iranian proxies on our bases in the region. There are sleeper cells, according to Tom Cotton and others, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, inside the United States. Would that have some sort of an impact here? Or maybe they could strike at American tourists in Europe. That's something that people are going to be on edge. The other thing that they want to know, Sean, is what this bomb damage assessment reads. Because when I talked to Richard Blumenthal, who's on the Armed Services Committee, he's a Democrat from Connecticut, he said, you know, this is probably not going to be one and done. He said we're probably going to have to go back at least a couple more times, and then also have some sort of a battle plan. Senator Blumenthal said, he was not convinced that we had an after plan that was sufficient to his stance right there. So that's something that members of Congress are going to have big questions about. And I should remind everyone that this comes right as the Senate this week was supposed to consider the big, beautiful bill and maybe pass it by this time next weekend. Does that interfere with this at all? Because everybody is so focused on what's going on in Iran and Israel, and if there are some sort of aftershocks, does that impact the Senate floor traffic? So far we don't know. The goal is to get that done sometime in the next few days. There's even a meeting tomorrow about kind of trying to weed in, what's out of that bill. That's very important. But you could see sometimes that events, as Harold Macmillan, the British Prime Minister, said, events are the most important factors in politics. We've had an event tonight, and whether or not that would impact the floor traffic on the Senate, we don't think so, but it's very early on here so far, Sean.
All right, Chad, we'll be following a lot of news. I know you will be reporting throughout the week this week. Thank you, as always. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.